Welcome, Amani. We're here at Cairo Caravan, and Amani is here to speak with me and share her expertise of dance and culture. She's an anthropologist at
Yes, Kennesaw State,
Kennesaw State.
Atlanta, Georgia.
And we're using a microphone here, so I will pass off the microphone to you. And I'd like to ask you about your early dance training, but even with specifically Middle Eastern dance, did you first get interested in the Middle East from your anthropological studies, and or did you hear the music first, or did you see a performance, or how did you get involved in Middle Eastern dance?
Sure, it's a good question, and it's kind of an odd way of going about it. So my early background is in dance and in drama, and so since I was a very young child, very young child, I've been on the stage, acting, dancing, a little singing. My singing's not great. I'm a dancer, but and modeling for some time. So I've been doing that a very long time. Middle Eastern dance came later, and it actually kind of came because I was in between ballet and in between modeling, and I really wasn't doing a whole lot of anything, which is kind of strange for a dancer. You can't just not be dancing. And I found a belly dance class and started it and loved it almost instantly. And I think because of my musical theater background, started performing probably much earlier than I probably should have. Yeah, I was one of those, yeah, probably out there a little earlier than I probably should have, and then just really fell in love. Um, it's kind of a chicken or egg question. Was the interest the dance and then the Middle East, or the Middle East and the dance? The thing is that they all kind of came at the same time, but through very different avenues. My interest in the Middle East didn't happen because of the dance. I was in school, I was in college getting my undergraduate, and I was actually focusing more on art history and religious studies. Ended up with a political science degree, but was kind of going that direction and was coming around to the Middle East at about the same time there that I was in the dance. So it's kind of peculiar how that came about, but so it's evolved together since.
And your focus has primarily been on Egyptian style Middle Eastern dance?
Actually, and that's kind of the funny thing. When I started belly dance, when I started Oriental, I started very much American cabaret, as I think many of us are probably introduced at that level, or now tribal, since tribal has made such a big splash. Um, it was actually only later, a good handful of years later, that I was introduced to Arabic instructors, and this absolutely changed the way that I thought about the dance. I had to, all of my dance vocabulary and tools had to be changed and re-edited. So the funny thing about this is that I started very AMCAB, and I actually started with a heavy interest in fusion, and I'm still very interested in fusion. I still have my ballet and jazz background that I liberally douse, add into my dancing. I think people have become interested in my classes and my workshops on Egyptian and the way that I teach Egyptian, especially in what I call in translation. Basically all of those things that make it really Egyptian. Right, those little nuances that make it Egyptian, but an Arabic instructor is not going to teach you. Maybe because
They're so used to it.
perhaps I don't know why. Maybe the analysis is not there. Maybe they don't consider it. Maybe it just feels natural. Whatever it is. So I think maybe this is where the Egyptian connection has gotten. Actually, my repertoire actually includes the dances of the Arab world. I do Persian dance. I do Greek. I do Latin. So I have a larger range, but I think I've become more known for my Egyptian style. And I'm not going to say no. So thank you. That's cool. I'm cool with that. That's all right.
Why Egyptian dance has been so popular?
Absolutely. So let's start with the first one about Egypt and why Egypt. So I think Egypt, at least in this country, I don't know that if it's held in a higher esteem, or if it's taught better, or what. I don't know that it's necessarily any of that. I fully suspect that it has to do with two things. One, immigration, and tourism. A lot. This is my take simply on it. Because you don't really see the American interest in Egyptian style belly dancing until like the 80s, mid to late 80s here. I don't know when you guys got it. I know the East Coast, where I am at in Atlanta, in that area, it's like 85. It starts to sort of emerge, and the 90s are absolutely, the decade of Egypt and this kind of thing. Okay, but at the same time, though, if you consider what's going on in Egypt, and in terms of immigration, you're getting more Egyptians. You're getting dancers who can't make a living in Egypt, right? So where do they go? They go to Europe, eventually America, and there's a lot of exchange there. So while I hate to think of people in Egypt suffering, at the same time, it's really kind of good for us in the West, because then they come to us, and we get to know about them, and we get to know about the dance, and we get to know about the culture. So I think that's really, really helped. Egypt has a very, very long history of tourism. I mean, for Pete's sake, since the Greeks and the Romans, the early Greeks, ancient Greek and Roman culture, have been tourists in Egypt. So I think there's a long history of Western tourism in Egypt that has also helped sort of the Western imagination and Western interest in Egypt. Sort of as a anecdotal comparison, my time in Lebanon, I'm watching Lebanon, obviously has a good tourism industry, but their history is different, and the wars have not helped. They're developing a dance tourism right now in Lebanon. They're developing that whole tourism, and they're really pushing it. And it's interesting because when you talk to them, whether you ask them or not, a lot of the narrative, especially surrounding the dance tourism, they compare themselves, they compare to Egypt. They talk about Egypt and how Egypt does it wrong, and this is this and this is that, and what's dance and what's not dance, and what's art and what's not art. And I find it interesting that they throw Egypt in there. So clearly Egypt must be doing something right.